In this video, we'll go through some of Illustrator's basic shape tools and get familiar with using modifier keys to perform shortcut commands. When using modifier keys, you can access functions, panels, tools, and also create variations of your basic shapes. Some modifier keys that we will use are the Shift key, the Command and Option keys on a Mac, and the spacebar key. If you are a Windows user, the Control key is equivalent to the Command key, and the Alt key is equivalent to the Option key. So first thing we'll do is start to create some of our basic shapes. So before we start, I'll go up to the File menu and create a new document by selecting New or Command N. I'll just make a new file and I'll just call this Basic Shapes. I'll make it a landscape orientation with one artboard. And then I'll click Create. So the first thing that I'll do to make sure that we are all viewing the same layout is go up to my workspace and choose Essentials Classic. If your panels and tools are not organized like this, go back to your workspace menu and just choose Reset Essentials Classic. So now from here on the left-hand side, we'll look over to our toolbox. And down below here, you'll see some of our basic shapes. So the first one we'll take a look at is our rectangle tool, our rounded rectangle tool, ellipse tool, and polygon. We'll also go through the star tool and our line tools as well. So the first thing that we want to do is maybe tear this off. So I'll hover my cursor over the right-hand side of my tool panel and click on this button here, and then just position my tools off to the side. I'll do the same thing for the line segment tool. So I'll hold down my cursor on that tool for a second, and then click on the tear off and position that below. Okay, so we'll start with the rectangle tool. So I'll select that one, and you'll notice that in parentheses, the shortcut key is the letter M. So you can either just tap the letter M on your keyboard to bring up the rectangle tool. And creating a rectangle is fairly straightforward. You just take your mouse, click and hold your mouse in a down state, and then drag, and then release your mouse, and it creates a rectangle. So remember that you have to add attributes to this. So if you look over to your toolbox, you'll see that right now it has a white fill with a black stroke. So if I wanted to change the fill color, I can actually come up to my control panel or double click on the fill color in my toolbox, and I can click and then choose one of the colors from my swatch panel. Now these are all default colors, but when we get into swatches, I'll show you your swatch libraries and how you can customize other colors to add in here. So we can change this rectangle to any color. We could also click on the stroke, and we could either have this with a none or transparency, or change the stroke color as well. I'll just remove the stroke on this shape. And now we could see the shape on our artboard. So if I want to move this shape, that's when I can select my selection tool, and that shortcut is the letter V. So I can click and move this around. Some other things that I can do with my selection tool with a vector graphic is either scale it, rotate it, and copy it as well. So if I want to scale this proportionately, I can hover my cursor over top of one of the corner edges. So as I click and drag, this will scale the rectangle. If I hold down the Shift key while I'm scaling, it'll keep it in proportion to the original size. So what you want to do is remember to hold down the Shift key while you're clicking and dragging while scaling objects, and then release your mouse first, and then release the Shift key. Another thing that I can do is rotate this shape. So if I place my cursor on the outside of one of the corner points, you'll see that your arrow turns into a double-sided curve. If I rotate this shape while holding the Shift key, it'll constrain it to a 45-degree angle. So you'll see that I can rotate it at 45, 90, 135, 180, 225, and 270, and 315. Okay, so all of those show up in the degree markers there, and then I'll release my mouse and then release the Shift key. So what I'll do is just hit the delete key to remove this from here. And then we also have the rounded rectangle tool as well. So to create that, it's the same sort of function. You just click and drag. And if you want to increase the radius of the corners, while your mouse is still in a down state, you can tap the up and down arrow keys, and that will increase the radius of the corners. And then you can release your mouse. So also when you select your selection tool, you'll notice that it has these little widgets in the middle here. Okay, these can also be used to adjust the radius of your corner points. And you could do the same thing with your rectangle tool as well. So you'll notice that there is no square tool, and this is again where your modifier key comes in handy. So if you choose the rectangle tool or your rounded rectangle tool, if you click and drag while holding shift, this will create a square. So it creates your shape at a proportion. So now all sides are equal. Okay, so I can drag and then release my mouse and then release the shift key. So another thing I could do with my shapes is copy it using a modifier key. So if I move this over to the left, I can now hold down the option key, and then with my selection tool, I can click and drag and make a copy of that shape. I'll also hold down another command key, which is Command Z to undo. So if you ever make a mistake and you want to undo something, Command Z or Control Z on a Windows machine is the function to undo. Now if I hold Option and drag while holding Shift, you'll see the Shift key keeps it in line with my object that I'm copying. So I'll hold down Option and Shift, and then release my mouse, and then release Shift and Option. So I'll just select these and hit the delete key. And then we also have the ellipse tool. So again, you can click and drag, and that creates an ellipse. Click and dragging while holding the Shift key creates a circle. And if you hold Option and Shift, and then click and drag, it creates a circle, or any shape for that matter, from its center point outwards. If you don't hold Option, you'll see that it starts from the left-hand corner or the top left-hand corner. And then when you release your mouse, it will commit that shape. Another thing you can do when creating shapes is, let's say I want to create a perfect circle from its center point. So I can hold Option and Shift and then click and drag. But before I commit this, I can move it in a different location on my artboard. And I can do that by holding the spacebar key in addition to my Option and Shift keys. So now with my spacebar key held down, it will pause my drawing, and then I can move this shape around. And now I can release my spacebar, release my mouse, and then release the Shift and Option keys. So there's a bunch of different ways that you can create shapes and modify them using modifier keys. So remember, to hold down your Shift key is to constrain the proportion of your shapes. Option can be used to draw a shape from its center point, or in conjunction with your selection tool, you can copy shapes holding down the Option key. Now some other shapes that you have are your polygon tool. So again, if you want to create a polygon and you want to add more sides to this or decrease the number of sides, you can tap the arrow keys up and down before committing. And if you want to create a triangle, you would tap your arrow keys all the way down to the end. Okay. If you want your triangle to be aligned to its baseline, before you release your mouse, you can hold the Shift key, and that forces it to be constrained to the baseline of the triangle. And then I can release my mouse and then release the Shift key. Another basic shape you have is your star tool. So again, you can add more sides to this by tapping the up and down arrow keys before you actually commit. Another cool thing you can do with your basic shapes is create sort of spiral art with them. So what I'm going to do is take my star tool. I'm going to invert my fill and stroke. So I can click on this swap fill and stroke button, or I can hold down the shortcut key, which is Shift plus X. And what I'm going to do is go up to my control panel and make the stroke as thin as possible. So I'm going to select 0.25 points. And now as I click and drag this star tool, or any shape for that matter, you're going to hold down your tilde key. Now the tilde key is the key right before your number 1 key and right underneath the escape key. So I'm going to click and drag while holding the tilde key, and I could spin this around. And then when I click off of it with my selection tool, you can see I've created some pretty cool spiral art. So you can create some pretty interesting patterns, or you can create some really cool abstract art by holding down the tilde key and dragging out any shape. Some other basic shapes that you might use are your line tool, your arc tool, and your spiral tool. Okay, so to use a line segment, again, it's pretty straightforward, just like your shape tools. You're going to click and drag while creating a line segment. You can hold the shift key to keep that straight or in a 45-degree angle. I'll hit undo. You could also select your arc tool and create an arc. And again, if you want to make the arc more steep, you can hit your up and down arrow keys. If you want to flip it on its opposite end, before you release your mouse, you could tap the F key, and that flips the arc. And lastly, you have your spiral tool. So again, if you want to add to the spiral or decrease the spiral, you can tap your up and down arrow keys. So when you have a shape and it has a stroke on it, you can change the weight of that stroke in your control panel here. So first I would select the object with my selection tool, click on the stroke, and then change its weight. Another tool that you have to create a varying weight of your stroke is called your width tool. So if we come over to the toolbox, we could select this tool right here, which the shortcut is Shift plus W. So we could select the width tool, and then at any point on our stroke, we can hover over this and you'll see a little plus sign. I can add this sort of node here and just click and drag outwards and increase the weight of the stroke towards the middle. Now, if I want to only control the width on one side of this, I can click on one of the nodes and hold down the Option key, and you'll see that it only makes the outside of the stroke weight thicker while keeping the inside thinner. So those are some of the basic shapes that you can create in Illustrator, and when using them in combination, you can create more complex shapes. So in the next video, we'll take a look at the pen tool and see how we can modify shapes and create custom ones. And once you get the foundation of using basic shapes in the pen tool, then you can put things together and create more complex objects and artwork.